Hey, y'all.
Good opening, Sarah.
It's so good to be with y'all at noon for our Before Sunday Pastor Talk. Today we are going to be talking about the text for the fourth Sunday of Advent, coming to us from Luke's Gospel. And we have with us Ryan Moore, Adam DeVries, Josh Rodriguez, Sandra Randleman, and Stuart Gordon.
Can they see our names up there?
Yes. I realized that as I was going through.
So as long as they can read.
Well, Josh is just known as just Josh. So this is just a time for us to talk through the sermon text for Sunday to get us thinking about what Ryan might be preaching this week. And
I'll know what I'm preaching this week after this.
But yeah, we're just hoping that this will give us a little bit of preparation for our worship together, whether it's virtual or in person this coming Sunday. So let's dive right into the text. Again, it's from Gospel of Luke, the 2nd chapter. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord." This is the word of the Lord.
Sarah, I would, as I said earlier, we can discuss too that whole, if there's any place anywhere else you want to go, the angels appearing.
You had said we could even take that through verse 20. Do you want me to just read that?
We can stay right in those first few, but if anybody else has brilliant thoughts beyond that.
I mean, the first few, I'm guessing the reason you chose that was, again, going to our theme of do not be afraid. And that is the first word the angels say to the shepherds, just as they had said to Mary, just as they had said to Joseph. But moving on to the text, he starts talking. The angel tells them that you will find the child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger. And then that's when the whole heavenly host appears. Glory to God in the highest. And they disappear, and the shepherds rush to Bethlehem. So that whole scene, it's really just a scene that when it says that they were terrified, I don't know if it was as explicit in the other text that Joseph and Mary were terrified, but these shepherds, were just minding their own business. And then out of nowhere comes this angelic host. And the first words are, "Do not be afraid." So I'm wondering, as you're hearing this Advent season, again, it's a text that we've heard multiple times in different formats. As y'all are hearing this Advent season, what is it that stands out to you? What's kind of speaking to your heart at this point?
I love the imagery of dark and light. You see that beautifully in the Gospel of John, but you also see it here because the shepherds are in the fields at night. It's dark. And then all of a sudden there's the glory of the Lord, and the sky is light. And it's so symbolic of the message that the angels are bringing to the shepherds. And it goes so much with fear. With fear, we feel darkness. And when we feel peace, there seems to be a light that comes into the darkness.
Yeah.
Kind of mimics that contrast of great fear, great joy. How those two go together. Oh, there's my mom and dad watching. Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad.
I'll confess that I was cramming for this exam just a few minutes before we went on camera, and was looking at the Greek text of this, not because I'm able to read Greek, but because I can kind of stumble my way through it like I stumble through Spanish, and never realized that the place of great emphasis in one of these sentences is the city of David. To you is born this day in the city of David. In English, it doesn't quite get the same sort of emphasis, but it's the last two words in that sentence are city of David. And so Luke does an awful lot of this. Luke does an awful lot of justifying, emphasizing Jesus' Jewish roots and the importance of his being part of the royal line of David, and the importance of his parents being law observant, and all that stuff. And I just never noticed that before, that a significant part of this announcement is that the birth takes place in the city of David.
Well, and it's also juxtaposed, fear not, behold, I bring you good news that will be for all the people. So not just the people who, whose king was David, not just the people who have followed, I think that's because Luke also is writing to the Gentiles, and it's this broadening of God's promises for all. So this good news is for all people, and it's happening in this specific city of David.
Can I also add? Well, one, Mary Baker, thank you for watching. It's a grace to share this time with you. And we have Ann Sheldon Bird. Sarah, I think you know her.
She's my mom. Hey, Mom.
Oh, moms and dads.
Moms are watching.
When I think a lot of people ask the question, like, where was God when such and such? Where was God? And Stuart, hearing you talk about like the city of David, it's funny because we don't always have such a detailed sense of like, this is where God was. But in this story, if you ask the question, like, where is God? Well, God was in the city of David, laying in a manger. That's where God was that day. And just thinking about just how detailed God got with us in this scene, where we get to see right where God is. And that feels like a huge blessing because of how often we have to ask those questions in this world. Or maybe we don't have to, but we certainly do. And just thinking the image and the picture that this scripture paints is that's where God was, right there in that city, in that field.
I think that's a great homiletical pickup. Doubling down on the willingness to say God promises to be present here. Mm-hmm. We talk about the presence of Christ in word and sacrament. And though God is present everywhere, we confess as Christians that he promises in some particular way to be present as the people gather at the communion table. Mm-hmm. And so the willingness for the church to proclaim that, yes, God says you will meet me here in this place.
Yeah.
Well, and that it's a place that's unexpected, right? I mean, I keep coming back to that. I don't know. I think that's part of the theme for me this Advent is God's arrival, that it was not expected that Mary would bear the Son of God, that it was not expected that Joseph would have a bride who's pregnant before they're married, and that it was not expected that the Messiah would be like, where you're going to find God is in the city of David, wrapped in swaddling cloth, lying in a manger. And so being open to the unexpected, when we do ask that question, where is God? And he reveals himself, that it's not necessarily going to be in the place that we would have assumed.
It's also unexpected to whom this is proclaimed. It's not proclaimed to the religious leaders, but to shepherds on a field. Right. The most unlikely of people. Talk about social levels. They were the least of these shepherds in a field. And who do the angels come to? Who does God reveal this glorious coming of God upon this earth, but to the least of these?
I think Rachel's question that was just up there is a really good one. Good reminder. God has promised to be present even in this year of difficulty. I guess it's not a question so much as a statement of faith, but I do think that can be a question. Like, how do we trust in God's faithfulness? So, and then I'm thinking of Stuart, you taking us to the city of David. The assigned Old Testament lesson for this coming Sunday is 2 Samuel 7. And this is where David is lamenting that he's built himself a palace, but he hasn't built the Lord a home. And so he tells Nathan, I'm going to build, that's my next thing to do, is to build a home. And then the Lord speaks through the prophet and says, don't worry about it. I'm going to build you a home. It's not what you can do for me. Mm-hmm. It's what I need to do for you. I mean, that's 1,000 years before Jesus. Mm-hmm. The Davidic line flames out 500 years after David or so. I'm rounding up. And then you've got another 500 years of, is God faithful to his promises?
Yeah.
And then the arrival, I mean, this somehow right there, Stuart, you're taking us to the Greek. And Luke is saying, well, see, I told you, he is faithful, and he does hold true to his promise, and he is going to build the house of David. And wait till you see it. You know, all those home shows that show you these wild and crazy homes. Well, this is one that you needs a miniseries for. But anyways,
Yeah.
that kind of connection.
Emily has a couple of comments here. She says, how cool is it that Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem, and then to add on to that, to pay taxes, a governmental task, and yet it was also the city of David. I get the sense that she's picking up on there's more going on here than just, well, there's a lot going on here. Incredibly dynamic.
Yeah. I think that's the idea that there is, I don't know, that what Sandra was saying, that God is revealing himself, he's choosing these shepherds. I think for me, as you're looking at, this is the second chapter of the gospel, and especially in Luke has a very unique emphasis on Jesus's ministry to women, Jesus's ministry to those in the margins of that society, and that he starts right at the very beginning, setting that path, that Jesus in his ministry is reaching out to those. He's not necessarily going to be a guest preacher at First Pres, right? Like there's a different dynamic there. There's a different priority, and it's priorities that are completely kind of opposite of what we would do, right? Like if the king of the world, if the Messiah was coming, you would assume that it would be announced to the most important people, the people who are I mean, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, like the news of the resurrection was first revealed to women who were not deemed trustworthy in that time. And the news of the birth is revealed to shepherds who have no like social capital, right? And yet this story continues to grow and build and reach beyond just these shepherds in the fields.
Might I say that in this season, as I'm teaching Galatians in Sunday school, I'm finding an awful lot of affinities between Paul and Luke on this score. Paul's big challenge in Galatia is that some Jewish Christians are telling Gentile Christians that they need to be circumcised and observe the purity laws in order to be Christians. And it seems like the sort of epistolary analogy to Luke's narrative, and it's really all the gospel narratives. It's one of the big issues that's underneath all the gospels is, does a Gentile have to become a Jew in order to become a Christian? So all the Sabbath controversies, Jesus dining with sinners and outcasts is Jesus' lived expression of the way in which law observance is no longer the criterion for inclusion in the people of God. That the shepherds could not stay law observant, according to Ken Bailey, like you mentioned to us, Sarah, because they were always touching blood, they were always touching dead animals. And so it was just the timing of, they couldn't purify themselves and keep doing their job. And that Jesus is always dining with sinners and outcasts. It's the analogy, the narrative analogy to Paul's discussion with the Galatians about the full inclusion of Gentiles, not strict law-abiding people within the people of God. It's our invitation, the 6 Gentiles on the screen here,
right? Yeah.
To belong to the God of Israel.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I'm like, and that's what we are. I think sometimes when we're reading the text, we lump ourselves in because, especially if you've grown up in a Christian home and you're like, yeah, but we're the ones that have been grafted in. We're the ones that by God's grace have been included. And yeah, I don't get called a Gentile a lot. So I would love to read. Oh, go Josh.
I was going to ask the question, and my sense is Sandra Sandra, Stuart, and Ryan, I guess all of you would have better answers than I would to this, having not grown up with the Presbyterian hymnal at my side. When you think about this, or yeah, I guess Ryan, when you think about this text and you hear what Presbyterian hymns, what hymns from our hymnal come to mind, and are there any lines of scripture that you think we sing from this? And my sense is there are, but I can't get them. They're not
While
coming.
shepherds watch their flock by night, all seated on the ground, the angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around. And glory shone around.
Sorry, I can't.
Angels we have heard on high.
Glory.
Is there anything? But I'm wondering, is there anything we sing that makes more sense, some sense of this? That was beautiful, by the way. Thank you, Alfred.
Josh, you got to realize, in Sarah and Adam and me, you have not only 3 Presbyterian ministers, but 3 Presbyterian preacher kids.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've been pretty much steeped in it.
Yeah. What are the hymns? What are the hymns? What are the lines from the hymns that we should think about?
Well, I think that was the first one that came to mind, the one that Sarah sang, and Joy to the World.
That? Wait, what is the one that Sarah sang?
While shepherds watch their flocks by night.
Okay.
Very unique title. What was the other one, Stuart?
Well, I think of Joy to the World. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, heaven and nature sing. Yeah.
Angels we've heard on high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably the best one right there.
Yeah.
What is Angels from the Realms of Glory? Is that?
Angels from
the realms of glory, wing your flight o'er all the earth.
Does that mention the shepherds?
Not sure if it's got angels.
Yeah, it goes through stanzas with different characters in the story. Shepherds, leave your... Okay.
Are we singing any of these this Sunday?
Yeah, we're singing
them, yeah.
While shepherds watch their flocks by night.
Different tune.
Yeah.
Ooh, what tune? What tune
And
is
it's
it?
just called the Christmas tune, is what it's called, I think.
Oh.
What's the tune?
That's what it's called. The tune is Christmas. Guys, I mean, I know music pretty well, but I don't know the.
Also, have we not named Hark the Herald, Angels Sing? Have we not said that one yet?
Yeah.
Oh.
But you're asking the tune name. The tune name is different than the title.
Thank you, Adam. That was pretty much on the money.
Yeah, because that's, Peace on earth and mercy mild. Because that's verse 14.
God and sinners reconciled. Come on. I mean, that's just
One of the
Our viewers did not realize they were tuning in to the singing
concert.
pastors today.
you know one of the ones I love. I'm pulling up the. You all know Before the Marvel of This Night, and the choir is going to sing this Christmas before. How does that go? If I had the music in front of me, here it is.
Before the marvel of this night.
Yeah, and this is.
Ryan, move to your right. There you go.
Well, I was just thinking if I could pull up the lyrics. But it's the angels. It's unique because it's the angels' response. Maybe it's in our hymnal. I wonder if they put it in this. Yeah, they put it in this one.
Sorry, and Shelley Wright brings up a point worth considering too, Ryan. While you're getting there,
Go for it.
check hers out. She says the shepherds were certainly more easily humbled than others might have been.
Yeah.
Which kind of echoes back to what was being said, but yeah, for God to show up here in this place to these people.
And Shelley, hello. Shelley is the head of George's little Jewish synagogue school, B'nai Amunah, back in Tulsa. So it's good to have you, Shelley. We miss you all so much. And so I'd stop on the way to dropping George off. We'd have little theological conversations on the drop off and pick up. It's so good to have you.
But you were saying, Ryan, about the...
Did you find it?
Yeah. It's addressed to the angels. So it goes, before the marvel of this night, adoring folds your wings and bow, then tear the sky apart with light and with your news the world endow. Proclaim the birth of Christ in peace. So they're getting their marching orders. And of course, all those Renaissance depictions of angels, they're just false. I mean, they're not fat and cute and cheruby. These
They're
are soldiers, regimented, and they're going to war, but to bring peace. And I just love the idea of this kind of perspective change. Proclaim the birth of Christ in peace, that fear and death and sorrow cease. Sing peace, sing peace, sing gift of peace, sing peace, sing gift of peace. And you don't often think of that. It just takes us into a different side of Christmas. And I think we often.
Walter Brueggemann had one of the best Christmas sermons I've ever read, and it was entitled Bet on the Baby. And it just inimitable Brueggemann kind of rhetoric that also takes you to that kind of place. And he's preaching out of Matthew and Herod, killing all the firstborn or all the boys under the age of 2, and the fear of that night and the intimidation that Herod tries to instill in folks. And the sermon is Bet on the Baby. If there's going to be a showdown between Herod and the baby, we kind of have a good idea who's going to win this.
I love it. But you wonder, those shepherds, I mean, don't you think, it's reading into a text a little bit too much, but don't you think a response from the shepherds could have been, not going to go? I'm not, if what you're talking about is a king who is tended to or announced by angelic host, do you think they could have been self-aware enough that they were low lives, and that a response could have been, it's just not where I should be going. I'm not going to go to Buckingham Palace. I don't belong there. And yet you don't read that into the text, and it's probably reading too much into the text. But
I was thinking that same thing of verse 15, when the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let us go to Bethlehem and see this this thing that has happened that the Lord has made known to us. So like their first response is, all right, let's go. Like it doesn't seem like there's a hesitation, but I agree with you. I think there would be a little bit of like, it's a formidable prospect to go to a Messiah whose birth had just been announced to you by an angelic host. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I wonder, Ryan, I mean, I think kind of two responses to that question. One, I definitely think they had the choice to say no, like, I think that's available to us, to say no to God's love. But then also, like where you named about Herod, right, being like trying to intimidate and spread fear. Like fear was the tool of leading at the time. Oppression was the tool of keeping these people in their spot. And it's the angels don't use that tool. They actually say, don't be afraid, And I wonder, there's, every account, or at least as we've been talking about this, every account where we have these heavenly beings show up, the immediate reaction of the humans is fear. And then there has to be permission. Fear not, don't be afraid. And so I wonder if there's something to that. Like there's this, the reason we can be in a pandemic and not be afraid is because we have a God who said, fear not, right? There's this, there's a lot of reasons to be afraid. And the reason we are not is because God instructs us not to be, So I think there's something there that fear not isn't just permission, but it's also invitation further to come and see the newborn King.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting us back to the question. Yeah.
Well, and Mary Earthman goes further with it and says all the scriptures during Advent seem to be centered on trusting God without question. After first shock, Joseph, Elizabeth, Mary, shepherds, lesson for us all. Absolutely, Mary.
And there's a lot of symbolism to the shepherds as well. David, was a shepherd. Micah 5 refers to one who will feed his flock. So there's that prophecy for those who went back and reflected upon the story. They would have associated Jesus with the legacy of David, and certainly with the prophecy in Micah.
Yeah.
Is there a would there be a good modern equivalent of a shepherd? I mean, a first century shepherd. This is not here in Luke 2, and in the first century, shepherds aren't at this point considered. There's not warm fuzzies around that. I'm curious. Would there? You maybe have an idea of a modern equivalent that would be helpful, because we don't live with shepherds around us, and
I don't know quite where the shepherds would have fallen on the totem pole in society, so I'm hesitant to say.
Pretty far at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you name some of the traits, and they were nomadic, they didn't have anywhere to lay their heads. They had to be vigilant all the time. They had to sometimes fight off attacking predators from the sheep. They had to pour everything they had into the well-being of the livestock. Didn't really live for themselves, but lived to care for the sheep. There might be
truck drivers.
That was one that came to my mind.
Yeah,
something like that.
that's what I'm hearing.
Sleeping, in rest stops, stopping for a time to get their sleep in because they've got their 8 hours of driving, so they've got their trucks running and they're nodding off in the cab there.
Kind of disconnected. One of the commentaries I was reading was saying a certain radius out of Jerusalem, which would have included Bethlehem, the sheep in those flocks would have been designated for sacrifice and in the temple. There could be some cool things that you could kind of play with there. These are set aside somehow. And what these shepherds are doing is raising up these sheep to be used in the faith as a way to make the people either sacrifices of their thank offerings or their sin offerings of atonement, one or the other. They made me think, what does it mean to be a shepherd, to shepherd, to midwife? I don't know. There are some images there that I think you could play around with.
Emily's comment a moment ago, she was reminding me of 2013 when we were in a group that went to Israel and went to a place presented to us as, not too far from where the actual shepherds would have been. There isn't a lot of green pasture around there. I was looking for Psalm 23. I was looking for these lush fields. And what we saw was a lot of rocks and hills and the flocks having to hunt around for a morsel to chew on, which kind of reoriented me. I don't know what I'm dealing with in Psalm 23 for one thing, but for another, it points out to the challenge all the time to find something to graze upon.
Yeah, if you're going to be a sheep, better to be a sheep in Scotland than to be
Yeah.
But that's the shepherd's role, right? Is to find the limited resources for the sheep to graze upon. So, they're leading them to food. Right? That's the shepherd is kind of leading them, which is what our shepherd is doing. I think that's a more accurate depiction of the life of faith as a sheep is kind of going from patch of grass to patch of grass. Or at least my life of faith.
Yeah.
We're gonna ask our listeners, what ideas do you all have of a modern day shepherd? If anybody else has an idea, I'd love to get some more thought around that into the conversation. Not just the pastors here, but anybody who's watching. I also, Ryan, I thought you kind of ended on a thought last week about God sort of showing up in this really lowly place, and I think it's just over and over again. It's coming up right now of just how lowly of a place this could have been, you know, and thinking about the Godspeed curriculum, Sarah, when God could have showed up in the world when there was Twitter. And Jesus could have tweeted about himself and everybody would have known in a matter of minutes, you know? And just the idea that God would have shown up during this time when, you know, the only option is to walk about. There's no technology to get it out there. And yet the first reliance was not on Twitter, but on these shepherds, on shepherds working in the field this night. So... we also have a couple of answers. People say pastors are shepherds. I don't know. What do you?
But that, you know, and that's where Jesus has, right? He's redeemed a metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's the good shepherd. I think Craig Barnes is the one that will say, you know, Jesus is the shepherd. Pastors are just the sheepdogs, like, or the instead of calling, I think you often refer to us as the lower shepherds, Ryan.
Under shepherds.
Under shepherds, yeah. So,
is that not one you've heard?
I just know the sheepdog one, but I like under shepherds.
I like essential workers is good. I was also thinking of traveling, all those traveling nurses who are going to, you know, relieve nurses in hospitals right now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't typically think of like doctors, like not in a pandemic. We don't think of doctors as also like shepherds, but like there could be something there.
Yeah.
I was also thinking of all the teachers, like the countless teachers who are on Zoom, you know, like right now, who are traveling from classroom to classroom, literally going to every single kid's home via the inconsistent internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be there.
I wonder too, Adam, with that, just going off of that, when God shows up in the world and he shows up in a lowly place to some people who just aren't that impressive of what society has given, how difficult would it have been for the first people who started to hear this message that God was up to something? How difficult would it have been to hear from shepherds and Mary and Joe, you know, this little grumbling of God was up to something? Just how difficult would it have been for those first Jewish people to hear that this is the way that God was choosing to do this, not in the temple, not through the elites, not through the Pharisees or the Sadducees, maybe a sect that you may have expected. I mean, obviously pretty stinking difficult because they just kept trying to kill the guy. But, Amanda Bird Blevin says, hi, Sarah.
Hi, Aunt Sarah. I mean, I think that's, we're running out of time, but I think that's a good question. I mean, I guess that's part of, the metaphor is hard, but like when you're thinking about modern day shepherds, I kind of put us as pastors on the end of the Pharisees. Like in that there are times where the message is coming unexpectedly from places that, you know, we're kind of steeped in this, but as a pastor I've only been a pastor for 6 years, but being attentive to the places and the people, you know, that sometimes it's easy to discount in maybe that is young people. I've seen that a lot in the churches I've served where it's like, hey, let's be a little more attentive to what the youth are saying. That's something Adam's talked about too, is like, I don't know, you said things about like the church.
The unique frequency of God's voice,
yes,
that maybe different age groups in the church can hear, that we need each other gathered together.
Yeah, you did the thing with the like high pitched sound. I was there when you did that once, and the parents could hear it, and it kind of ruined your metaphor. But but yeah, the different frequencies.
Can you describe that so people know what you're talking about, Sarah?
It was in a baptism meeting when Adam was sharing with the youth who's going to be baptized and their parents about how there are things that we can hear, the different frequencies that God speaks. And there are ways that God might speak to young people that we just aren't attuned to. And so he used like this app, I guess it was like a dog whistle or something, where it's like, you still hear the pitch? Can you still, because the older you get, the higher frequencies you're unable to hear. And he's like, can you hear this one? Yes. Can you hear this one? Yes. Can you hear this one? Yes. Oh, okay. Like, well, most people
They were
can
too young.
But I've been in the room when that happens, and people can't hear it.
Yeah.
You know, you get to those higher frequencies, and everybody over the certain age
They
is
were
like,
lying. Those parents were just lying. They were so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final thoughts as we wrap up. Ryan, do you have enough fodder for sermon?
Yeah, just imaginatively, I do have this wonder about the choir, the angel. What did that sound like?
Mm.
And then I think about what a waste that angel choir was sent to these lowly shepherds who were probably tone deaf, had no music appreciation class. And there's something about it that seems unjust to me, but also is a huge part of the grace of God. And that God would assemble his angel armies, rehearse them to serenade these lowly shepherds.
Yeah.
There's something so beautiful about that. Anyways.
Can I finish? I pulled this up earlier. Sorry. C.S. Lewis, in his letters, Screw Tape Letters, he's writing about laughter, and he's writing about joy. And he gets into, if you don't know, this is an elder demon writing to a younger demon. C.S. Lewis takes some wonderful liberties in creating this book. But he's writing about laughter and joy. And the elder demon, the perspective is written from, he's talking about music. And he says this, he says, something like it, the joy, is expressed in as much of that detestable art which humans call music. And something like it occurs in heaven, a meaningless acceleration in the rhythm of celestial experience, quite opaque to us. But just how beautiful the music is. And I was struck by just how many songs you all had immediately when I asked about hymns, and just wondering, in a season of Advent and Christmas and these beautiful songs that come to mind that we sing, and just how much that is echoed in heaven as it is on earth, you know?
Well, and I think one of the risks of these gorgeous songs is that they can become sentimentalized, right? Like, I get so nostalgic over some of these hymns because I've been singing them for 32 years. But I actually love that we have been printing the hymns, just the words, in the bulletin. Because of COVID, we've been trying to reduce, touching things, and we don't have hymnals in the pews. And so it's just it's just the words. And you can look at them, you can read them before you sing them, you can read them after, I can hold on to the bulletin. And just the poetry of it and the message of it is renewed for me. The music itself is gorgeous, but I think sometimes, I can sentimentalize these songs, whereas when you just kind of pluck them out and you see the words and you realize the story that's being told. I mean, even your question that you posed, it was like, what theological insight can they give us to this text? Not what warm fuzzies do they make us feel when we light a candle, but what is the depth of the meaning there? So, Okay, Josh, do you want to close us out? We went over 8 minutes. Sorry, y'all. But we must have been in heaven this past Sunday. Yes, we had some great musicians at the church on Sunday. And you all, the services are posted. We have lots of music and our services and our special events that have been posted online. So you can always visit that and relive it over and over again. But for now, we're going to close in prayer. Josh, can I ask you to pray us out as we end our conversation? Yeah, and let my prayer be just the lyrics of a song that we've been singing this season. So, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel, shall come to thee, O Israel. Amen. Amen. All right, y'all. We'll see you. We're actually not going to do next Thursday because it's Christmas Eve day. We're going to do it on Wednesday. I'll send an email reminder for y'all. Rachel had mentioned this from communications, but we'll post that and make sure you know that we'll be here. I think it's the same time, isn't it, Josh?
Is it the Christmas Eve text?
Noon on Wednesday. It should be. Yeah.
It's going to be a wild text. You might want to take a look at it before you
Oh, yeah.
come.
Revelation. Nice.
Man.
You go, Ryan.
Noon on Wednesday, the 23rd. We'll see you back here. But thanks for your time, guys.
All right. See y'all.
See y'all.